Now, I don't know if he's planted some bug on her. He's put some app on her phone where he can eavesdrop on her. But he's listening to her session. Okay, so this episode opens with Emma showing Pete Jess' body. So obviously she can't go to the cops because she's in witness protection. Of course, that's going to draw some unwanted attention. There's going to be a bunch of questions. People, trying to figure out why she was out there. It's just a lot. It's a lot. So she told Pete, and she showed him where the shack was. And of course, when they went in, Jess' body was nowhere to be found, and there was like this mangled bird carcass there. So now she's confused, like she's kind of disoriented, like did she really see what she saw, or is it just kind of playing with her at this point? So John is at work, and he stocked shelves in a grocery store. And so one of his co-workers came over to talk to him and asked him how the interview went. So they knew that he had a job interview, and he told them that it was for to be able to become a car salesman. And so he told her that he didn't get the job. And they talked a little bit, and she walked away. And as she walked away, this woman walked up because he was restocking the freezers in the frozen food section. This woman walked up to grab something, and right away she caught his eye. And then he kind of turned away and started saying this prayer to himself.
Love is a virtuous mind that creates only peace and happiness.
So John is hanging by a thread at this point. And, it's like the question keeps being asked, do you think that people can change? And John is struggling. So Emma and Pete, they make it back to Emma's house. And of course, he saw the alcohol, and he told her about the medication that she was on, and how he told her that mixing alcohol with the medication she's on can cause hallucinations. So now even he's thinking that, it was a combination of the alcohol with the medication on top of the distress of finding out about Parker.
I told you that one of the side effects of the meds that you're on is hallucinations.
And he's not really, believing that, she saw what she saw. And then she made reference to the group home. And of course, he was like, what group home are you talking about? And so she told him, because she told him that's where Jess stayed. And he ends up telling her again how she should refrain from, forming attachments to young girls, and how, something about her history. And it's, so this is the second time this has been referenced, but, it hasn't been elaborated on at this point.
You can't make friends with vulnerable young girls. You have a history.
But he basically told her, just reiterated that he wanted her to lay low and to kind of stay away from, certain people in town. So Mary is meeting with John at some diner, and he's actually looking for clarification on what exactly is it that you want me to do. And he told her that he had done some research, and that Karen Miller is nowhere to be found. They must have given her a new identity, and that he is not able to go any further. He's not a cop. He doesn't have access to what they would have access to. And even if he was a cop, her being in witness protection, only select people would even have access to her file. So even if he was a cop, chances are he still wouldn't know. He wouldn't have access to it.
Done some research. She's gone. She has a new identity. I couldn't find out who she's become.
But, so then she starts going in again about how, she made the reference of, you used people that was close to your victim to kind of draw them out. And she was saying that was a closing argument of, the judge. That was a statement he made, I guess, at the end of his trial. And she's basically saying, I want you to use those same tactics to draw Karen out.
Now, I think you could just as easily apply that technique to our situation.
So basically, she's ready, she's to the point where she wants him to start going after people that's close to her to force her to reveal herself. So Emma's at work. So the next scene is Emma's at work. And who walks in? Rose. Rose is one of the girls who was bullying Jess in the bathroom. She was the one telling her how she was trash and, calling her a tramp, a whore, and all this kind of stuff. So she walked in, and the woman who owns the the salon knew her. She was like, "Girls, now you know your mother told you that you can't get your hair cut." And then, her and Rose and Emma made eye contact. And she made some comment, I bet you don't know my mother, so you can do it. So she wants Emma to cut her hair. So Emma was like, well, you don't know my work, so I wouldn't risk it. And so she just went on and plopped down in Emma's chair.
You don't know my mother, right? So you'll do it.
Well, you don't know my work. It's quite a risk.
And Emma basically said, are you going to make trouble for me? And then she's like, well, it depends.
You're going to make trouble for me?
I don't know yet.
And I'm like, girl, you already sitting there with your nose bandaged up and your lip cut. Like, Rose. Okay, now. So during Mary and John's meeting, Mary gave him an American Express gold card. Basically, you could use this for your expenses. So he purchased him a vehicle. And then you saw him sitting in the vehicle, and he was going through old news video of when the trial was going on with Parker and Emma, aka Karen. And of course, the reporters were all outside her mother's house, and so he was able to, see her mom, see how she looked, and he was able to zoom in the video to get her house number. So we know at this point he's getting closer to finding at least her mom at this point. So we go to Mary's house, the Barlow's house, and there's this whole news crew there, and they're ready to interview Mary. And she wants to keep her daughter fresh in the minds of the people. And so she wants to keep talking about it and just keep getting her name out there so that people, or if her daughter's still alive, she believes her daughter's out there somewhere, that somebody will contact her and tell her something. So just before they're all set up, I guess the person who was the reporter, she had just got off a phone call, and she walked over and she said, first she was all, we're so happy that you agreed to do this, but they got another person that they want to interview because at this point it hasn't been determined that Teresa was the victim of Parker and Karen's or Emma's. It's kind of up in the air. Yes, they were seen in the same place, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she was a victim of his. Now, the person that she was on the phone with is the mother of the victim that has been confirmed that her daughter was a victim of Parker's, and so now they want to go over to interview her. And initially, Mary was like, oh, so we're going to do like a joint interview, and they was basically like, no, we're actually heading over there now. You can see them breaking down the equipment that they just set up.
We're gonna go across to her now. So you're gonna do a split screen? We're actually heading straight to Larissa's place.
And so she was pretending to be gracious, like, oh, I understand. And so basically they're saying they're going to move her. They're going to come back at a later time to do her interview. And so the reporter walked off, and then she looked over at her son and was like, I want these people out of my house. So obviously she's not happy. She's not happy with that.
You get these people out of my house.
Yeah.
So Emma's now off work. She's walking home. Her leg has been bothering her ever since her little, situation in the woods. And her legs are all scarred up, and something is hurting her. She thinks something is in her knee or leg or something, but she doesn't want to go to the doctor again. Too many questions. So a police car pulls up, and it's Tom. So she's like, oh, hey. She's like, oh, so you're a cop.
Hey.
Hey.
You're a cop.
So she met Tom before when she went to apply for the job at the salon. And Tom was there because she had mentioned she had come from Seattle, and Tom was saying how he wanted to go there. And then, of course, the lady was like, don't you got something else, someplace else you need to be? And so he kind of walked off.
In Seattle, I cut in some really good places.
Oh, that's a place I like to go to someday.
So they talked a little bit, and he could see that she was limping. And so she actually asked him if he could give her a ride home, and he agreed. So we go back to the Barlow's house, and Mary is playing the Grief Olympics. So she's now watching the interview that they did of the other woman whose daughter was a victim of Parker's. And she's saying, oh, well, I'm basically saying that they only interviewed her because she knows how to show up and cry on cue. And
I don't blame Larissa. I mean, my God, I feel like crying every day too, but she is literally turn up and cry, Mom.
You can see Jake sitting there, and I can see this going to be a huge issue in the future between Jake and his mother, because at this point, you don't see really a whole lot of affection between Jake and his mom. You kind of see Jake being treated like he's her PR person, like he's her assistant, not her son, who's also grieving. And so he was basically saying, well, maybe, he was like, I know you're not ready to do a vigil. I know you're not there yet. So maybe we could just do something private. You, me, and Dad go to their church and light a candle and just say nice things to each other. Just be, them. It'd just be something small and intimate.
You, me, and Dad go to Holy Trinity and stand around a candle and say nice things to each other.
And then she starts going into, we need to remember what he did to his victims, how he put them in the van, kept them in there, and did all these horrible things to them. And he basically said, no, I don't want to remember those things. I don't want that in my mind. And, I'm going to go. He was like, you can continue to sit up and watch this TV. Let's keep talking to the TV. I think was his exact words. I'm about to go out and live what life I have. And he got up and he left. So you can see, you can kind of see when their relationship is hanging, I can see is on the rocks. So they flash back to Tom and Emma, they're talking, and her leg is really starting to bother her at this point. And so of course he's like, we should go I can take you to the doctor. Of course that's out of the question. So they end up going, I don't know if they went to his house, her house. I can't, maybe it was her, I don't know. And he's now trying to figure out what's in her leg. He finally digs it out, and it's a needle.
Whoa, what is that? A needle?
And then she's trying to figure out, how did this needle get into her leg? Was she stabbed by the guy? Because you remember she was attacked briefly. There was this whole tussle in the woods with this guy. And they're trying to figure out, how did that get into her knee? So we go to the next scene, which is AA meeting. And Angela, she's talking about, some of the struggles that she has. And, of course, they're being supportive. And, of course, then, the guy asks, the person who's leading the meeting, says, is there anybody else who would like to, say something? And then, don't you know, we hear, hi, my name is John, ... And then you see everybody, and of course they made a point to flash on, to focusing on Angela when everybody say, welcome, John, that whole thing. So you know that he found her. He's now sitting in her AA meeting.
Hi, I'm John, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, John.
I don't know if he has a drinking problem or not, but he's there. So as they were leaving, he was kind of trying to make small talk with her. And then he feigned being dizzy and fell out on the ground and talking about, don't worry about it. This happens all the time. And of course, she doesn't feel like she could leave him like that, which of course he knew, because the whole point of these meetings, these type of meetings, is to be supportive of each other in your time of need.
Down.
Are you okay? Oh my God.
I'm okay.
Oh my God, no.
And so she could see that he was in distress. So he knew that she wasn't just going to walk off and leave him on the ground. And so they're now talking, and she's kind of like, almost like he's flirting with her. It was just so disgusting and weird. Obviously she doesn't know that, but ew. So the next scene, Emma has made it back home, and she is talking to Pete. She's telling Pete that she was not hallucinating, that She remember feeling a pain. She remember being stuck with something, and that's why the needle is in her knee. And if she can remember the pain in the needle, then that means that Jess was real and something did actually happen to Jess.
And then I felt this pain, and now I know it was the needle that I have right in front of me. So if that was real, then Jess was real too.
And he's telling her that she needs to calm down, and she's basically saying that she wants him to get the police involved. And of course, he's like, no, we can't get the police involved because it's going to be too high profile. And eventually, she said that she was going to do it on her own. Eventually, he ended up having to say, you know what, I'll take care of it. I'll do what I need to do to figure things out. So then we flash to Lisa. Pete and Lisa. Lisa is Pete's wife. And so, they're talking, kind of going back and forth. She's telling some story about her dad. And you can kind of see his phone. And Emma sent him a text asking if he had called the police. And he said that, he ended up texting her saying that he would. And Lisa noticed that he was distracted. And so they talked and just a little playful banter. And then you realize, okay, something about Pete doesn't sit right with me. He's kind of creepy. Especially after, they go through the whole playful banter thing, and then she ends up saying, this is Lisa saying, they used to like to hear me, hear my stories or hear me talk. And he was like, well, that's when you used to pay me $100 an hour. Well, now, even though he was joking, you're like, okay, wait a minute. She used to be one of his patients.
He used to want to listen to me.
You used to pay me $100 an hour to listen to you.
Well,
okay. So she made some little flirty comment like, I'll make sure to leave money on the stand or something, and then they had their little entanglement, we'll say that. So we flash to Angela and Tom. They're in a restaurant and they're talking, and of course he brought up daughters, and of course they're now talking about how their alcoholism interfered with their relationships with their children. He did kind of slip in like, well, do you still talk to her? And her face kind of scrunched up, like kind of confused, like, no. And then, they went outside to smoke. And she's talking about the last time that they actually lived together. She was talking about a time when she got drunk and Karen, aka Karen, had to drive her home, and she was only 14 years old. It was storming, it was icy roads, and she ended up going into care, and she ended up going into it was supposed to be temporary, but she never came home. She stayed in the system. And he asked, all that happened in Texas. And she was like, no, it happened in Minnesota. So now he knows that she had a foster home. She was in foster care in Minnesota. And he just wanted to reassure her that you were a good person, that you were a good mom, And then of course he talked about, made up the story about his daughter, how his alcoholism, he forgot to pick her up, and then she ended up having to catch around with somebody else, and something untoward happened to her. She never really talked about it, and so he's like coming up with the stuff on the fly to try to relate to her, to get her to reveal as much information as possible. So this next scene really solidified like the creepiness of Pete, as far as I'm concerned at this point. Like I said, it's only episode 2, and I watched the episode and I do the recap. So I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future, but at this point, Pete, my creep meter is going off. Okay, so Lisa is now actually in therapy, and she's talking about how Pete thinks that he fixed her. He thinks that she's fixed, and that he fixed her, and he has this savior complex. And
he thinks I'm fixed. He thinks he fixed me. Pete likes to be the savior.
Even her being in therapy, if he knew that she was in therapy, that he would, want to question why she was in therapy, because she's supposed to be fixed, she's supposed to be better, all her issues and all that resolved, because that's normal. And the doctor asked her, like, okay, so if you know that he's like this, then why do you stay? And she said, because he's a good father, because of their daughter. And she said that girls without fathers are afraid of the world. And the doctor said, what do you think happens with girls with bad fathers? And so she said, he's not a bad father, he's just a bad husband.
And what about girls with bad fathers? He's not a bad father. He's just not a good husband.
And then you flash to Pete. He's holding the baby. He has these headphones on, and he's actually listening to her session.
So who do you turn to when you get your nightmares? Because you do still get them, don't you?
Now, I don't know if he's playing some bug on her. He's put some app on her phone where he can eavesdrop on her. But he's listening to her session. And I thought, oh, okay, so, yeah. Pete is weird. So, at this point, it seems like Mary agreed to do the memorial. And so, she walked in with her son. He's, happy because, they've been asking for this for a while. And he walked in, and it's wall-to-wall people. It was supposed to be an intimate thing with her, him, and his dad. And she was like, you invited the other parents too? And she was like, well, yeah, this is, a big deal. And she wanted as much coverage as possible. And
You brought the other parents.
I had to make this count.
This was just supposed to be us.
He, was feeling some kind of way. And of course, she's now walking down the aisle and they're all clapping like she is like Miss America. So, I don't know if this narcissism came, was something always a part of her, or is this, since the daughter died, or her daughter not died but disappeared, and her daughter disappearing. Like, she is just raggedy as shit to me at this point. Like, I don't care. I don't really care for her. I know that you can't really tell people how to grieve, but I feel like this is more than that. Like, she is doing the most. So she walked up on stage and she had all of the parents who has been confirmed victims of Parker, because remember, she's not a confirmed victim. Her daughter's not a confirmed victim of his yet at this point. And she gives this heartfelt speech, and of course you got, this rousing applause and the whole thing. And I'm just looking at this like, oh, okay, anywho. So John is home and he had his little shrine set up, and he sang some prayer, and he put red paint all over his hands, and he put some wings on the wall or something. I don't know what he's trying to do. So then you flash to Pete, once again having a creeper moment. There was this young girl, it was dark out, and she's walking by herself. It's raining. She doesn't have any umbrella. She has on like these tank top and these shorts. He's soaking wet, and she's just walking, right? She's on her way somewhere. And so he pulled up next to her and asked her, why she was out there and how it's not safe. But he was just so creepy the way he did it, right? And so he was like, well, I tell her she can get in and he'll take her home, take her where she's going. And of course she asked her who asked him who he was, and he was like, oh, just a friend of a friend or something to that effect. And she turned and her ass ran away. And I was like, oh, thank God she didn't get in that car. Pete, I don't trust your ass.
I'm just a friend of a friend. You okay?
Okay, so she ran away. Good for her. So Rose is at home, and if you remember back when she went to the salon, the lady was telling her, your mom don't want you doing anything to your hair. So she, decided she's going to go on and get her hair dyed. And I think it got a trim or something. I don't know. So her mom came in and saw her and was like, all we ask is that you looked the part. So now we're getting into this situation where you can see where Rose is, at this point, just verbally and emotionally abused. At this point, we don't know physically. And so her mom was like, well, Dad likes my hair. And so she ended up locking her windows and saying that you can't be trusted. And then, she was like, until you can be trusted, then you can't be trusted. And then she ends up locking her in her room. And you can see Rose saying, please don't lock me in. She's like begging her not to lock her in. And so, okay.
You cannot be trusted. Don't lock me in, Mom. Don't lock me in, please.
That's weird. So, you usually find that in children who are bullies. They're usually being abused at home in most cases. Well, I don't want to say most. In a lot of cases, they're usually dealing with abuse at home and they just dish it out. So, I guess that's par for the course. So, Mary is having her little entanglement with some kid that's about the age of her son. And, she wasn't, she was ready to keep going, but he was like, I don't know if I can, right?
Actually, I don't think I can. I gotta.
So she ends up getting a call, and it was John calling to give her an update. And he was telling her that, you know, there is no communication. You know, the mom hasn't spoken to her in years. But he did find out that she was in foster care in Minnesota. And so she was like, okay, so when are you leaving for Minnesota? And then he was like, well, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Part of the agreement with his parole is that he can't leave the state.
We've had a misunderstanding. I can't leave Texas. I'd be breaching the terms of my parole.
So she's now convinced him that she got to know all these people in these high places, and that, you know, he won't have any issues if he just go, because everybody's collateral damage at this point. Now, I'm not saying that I'm Team John, but what I am saying is that, bitch, I'm starting to hate you almost as much as I dislike John at this point, because it's like, who were you before your daughter disappeared? Like, I'm really not seeing that. And so, for her to claim that she got all these friends in these high places, that she has some influence on a parole board. Okay, that remains to be seen. So, I guess John is going to Minnesota. Okay, so we flash to Mary. She's made it home, and Jake is there, and he walks up to hug her, and he tells her that, you know, the memorial was a good idea, because they did get a phone call from someone who said they also had a daughter that went missing.
We got a call. Somebody saw the vigil. There was another girl who was never found.
And so she's now feeling vindicated, you know, like, okay, there's more to it. Now, that still doesn't mean that her daughter is still alive somewhere out there, like she believes. But she felt like she's on the right track, which I feel like is even more, you know, dangerous at this point. So we get to the group home, and Tina, who was the girl who ran away, she made it there, so she was headed to the group home. And the woman who was about to lock the dock up, she was asking, girl, where are you? Tina looked like she's kind of out of it. I don't know if Tina may have had a little smoked a little something, drank a little something, I don't know. But Tina, you know, but she still had enough sense not to get in that car, we'll say that. And so, Pete was sitting outside, and the woman who was about to lock the gate, she saw him in the truck, and he pulled off. So I'm like, oh, okay, so again, give me creep vibes. Okay, so we flash to Angela. She's at home. She's on the phone talking to one of her friends, saying how she had gone out with this guy, and how she's not looking for anybody, and how, you know, it was what it was. Next thing you know, a brick comes flying through her window, and it has a note attached to it, and it says, "You're a bad mother." And then they flash to old John walking, like whistling to his car, like he's just achieved something, jump in his car and he pull off. And I guess he's on his way to Minnesota. And so the final scene is Emma. She has this dream about something being carved into someone's shoulders, like a question mark. And, you know, I'm not a question mark. And then she wake up and then she check her back, and of course there's nothing there. And then for some reason, she called Jess' phone, and basically is saying that she's going to find out what happened to her. And, yeah, she's tired of being afraid, and she's just not, you know, she's not going to deal with it anymore. And that's pretty much how this episode ends.